like to call the meeting to order on the budget meeting. First item is everyone would stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, first item is introductions. I guess Sherry, Jan, gonna?
I'll just do very quickly, Commissioners. This is the first hearing, and I'm going to turn it over to Jan Brewer to go over tonight's information.
Hi, good evening, Commissioners. This is a first public hearing for your budget session. It is not required by the TRIM process. This is done for the taxpayers that they have the first opportunity to talk to you. We'll have 2 more public hearings by the TRIM process, which both will occur in September, and I'll give you the dates for them at the end of this presentation. So what I thought we would do is we would go through a PowerPoint presentation, if we can flip over. And we'll quickly talk to you about the highlights and the overall items of this budget. Jamie, if you'd like to go ahead and start. The highlights of this budget, there has been a major theme, and the theme has been results first. We have 6 major funding areas within this budget that have been highlighted. A continued commitment to law enforcement and public safety, infrastructure improvements through the CIP and using IST funds, employee compensation and workforce well-being, enhanced communications is another highlight of this budget, and meeting the public's level service demands for 2020, as well as innovation and technology investments. These are 6 of the highlighted areas that are highlighted within your budget message, and I strongly recommend any of the people listening at home, the budget message is online, to please go take the time to listen to the video on it. It clearly highlights a lot of these areas and goes in depth. What I'd like to do now is we will go through, Jamie, if you'll go to the next one. I thought you would like to look at the overall property values. This chart is very interesting. What this chart shows you is running from 2006. Now, 2006 is the property appraiser year. For you, it's FY 2007, so it runs a year behind. And you can see by the curve of the graph, it looks like we've recovered going into the FY 20 and 21 years. In the budget that's presented before you, we've done a 6.5% increase in 20 and a 6% increase in 21. As you know, the first estimate just came back, and it's a preliminary estimate from the property appraiser at 7%. We will get a final certification on July 1st. We'll adjust the numbers at that time and provide you the information. But at this point, we left everything within the years they are. Now, what's interesting about this chart in front of you is that to the average person, it seems, oh, you've surpassed where you were before, you've recovered, everybody's healthy. But the interesting part is you've had almost 80,000+ people move in this time. And it's not as much that property values have continued to go back to normal. Most of your residents have a Save Our Home cap that has kept their values down. A lot of what you're seeing is based upon the increased population that you've had. Jamie, if you'll move forward. One item in this budget is there are no changes in the millage rate. As you notice, you have the countywide operating is the total of the general fund, transportation, library, children's services, and parks. Each of those are dedicated taxing sources for those funds. Your unincorporated remains at 0.6109, and the Palm Air MSTU that you collect is 0.2546. There are no changes. And with that, Jamie, can you show them a history of the millage? Has been static for quite some time. No raises have occurred. Okay, Jamie, if we can go forward. So with that, I thought we'd do a few highlights of what's going on within your budget. As you can see, property taxes represent 34% of your budget at $250 million. The next largest category includes your charges for services. Charges for services in your budget represents 31% or $229 million. After that, the next largest one is overall the license permits and fees, dwindling down to other taxes, and then under intergovernmental, for a total net budget of $736.8 million. Now, where the money was spent and what you focused on, public safety is the largest expenditure you have within your budget at 26.68%, $196.6 million. Second only to that is the physical environment, which also includes the utility system that you have. That's at 23.74%. The total amount for that is $174.9 million. After that, general government and public transportation come in close after that. Public transportation at 72.1, and if we're going around the circle, human resources at 33 million, culture and recreation, which involves your parks, 29.6, and your capital outlay are your investments for the FY20 year that have been placed in the budget, and that's at $83.3 million. With that, Jamie, you want to go to the next one? With that, those are the highlights of the budget. I'm happy to go through the budget message. If you'd like us to pull out that message and play it for the viewers, I would really recommend that we let them go to the link that's on there. It's an excellent video. Really talks about the highlights of the budgets and the items that are there. You've also had several meetings so far. You've had a fund summary meeting, decision unit meeting, and a CIP meeting. All of that information is online for your taxpayers to go and look at. The remaining meetings that you have will be that you will have on July 30th a reconciliation and adoption of the tentative millage. What that means is that during our budget process, you flag several items. We'll come back on July 30th. We'll know the exact tax that the property appraiser is certified. We'll also know the estimates for the states on the gas taxes and these other things. So we're going to try to solve as many of the problems that you brought as soon as we can. When we come to this meeting, we'll provide you options, and then at this meeting, you'll set the tentative millage. The millage at that rate can go lower, but it cannot go higher. So the recommended budget has you remaining the millage is where it's been in the past, and it will stay there. After that, on August 13th, you'll have a utilities operating and capital improvement plan. We're trying to set the date for your IST meeting in August. We'll get that to you as soon as it's formalized. And then on September 10th and September 17th, you have two public hearings. The first public hearing will be noticed by the trim notice that your constituents will get in the mail from the property appraiser. Once you certify that millage, that will go into that process. And then they have an opportunity at that hearing to discuss the budget with you, and then we will publicly advertise the second one per the trim. And if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Just have one quick one. You said our property values went up 7% right now for what we know, but I remember reading something that said 7.2, and I've kind of said that.
The 7.2, I believe, was in the unincorporated area. I have to go back and look.
I remember seeing the 7.2, but you're right. Okay, got it.
And as I spoke with the property appraiser, because I was hoping he would give me a closer to where we were, he had told me 6.5. As he said, those are estimates that can maybe go up a little bit or maybe down a little bit until they get to the final numbers, and we'll know that July 1st. It's very close.
Very good. Thank you, Jan. Seeing no other questions at this point, we're going to open it up for public comment. I have one person signed up. Mr. Meehan, please come down and state your name for the record.
Only one person talking about this.
There's two.
Two.
Okay.
It always happens.
So I'm going to deal with the income statement as of April 30th that was, I guess, just published. Mike Meehan, Manatee County citizen. You have unrestricted cash right now of $637.9 million. That's up almost $20 million from last month. It's up $80.7 million from last year. You have total cash in the county savings account of $1.127 billion versus $942 million this time a year ago. It's up $185 million. It's up almost 20%. My view on government is that you should try to balance the revenues with the expenses. Balance the revenues with the expenses. But your business profit for the first 7 months of this year is 42 million versus 18.2 a year ago. Your governmental profit is 134.4 million versus 131.8 in March. Your total profit year to date is 181.1 versus 139.6 million a year ago. It's up 41.5 million. It's up 30%. First 7 months this year versus first 7 months last year. So based on this, I'm predicting that the county is going to have another $100 million surplus in fiscal year 2019. $100 million surplus. Just based on what the numbers are showing, the actual real results. Revenues less expenses. So, I go back to this 15% millage cut idea, which would cost $34.4 million. Reduce the revenues by $34.4 million fiscal year 2020, but half of that cut will be made up in the same year because your property taxes year to date are up 7.7%. And I go back to my health plan that I presented, and Commissioner Whitmore was responsive to that back in January. Health plan would cost $18.3 million. So the millage cut would be 34.4, the health plan would be 18.3, the total amount that you could cut into this surplus of $100 million would be $52.7 million into the surplus projected for this year. That would give you 39,000 dental and medical visits, 6,250 visits to the ER, and 1,875 admittances between Blake and Manatee Memorial. So you got a lot of money, and I guess you have to figure out how to spend it or to cut the amount of money that you're taking in taxes. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else from the public that would like to come down? Catherine?
Hi, Catherine Edwards. I didn't have any questions, and then I did. The total county outlay is something like 1.2 billion when you include the constitutionals. And I know the Department of Public Safety is doing engaging in a lot of building projects for the corrections department within the sheriff's office. It's also true that I've been out of town. So my question is, are the constitutionals going to be making presentations on their budgets this year? And if so, Ms. Brewer was kind enough to give us the dates for these other meetings. I was wondering if she could provide dates for those meetings as well. Thank you.
Catherine, if I may, we already had the constitutional meetings, but all that information and documentation is on the web.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Whitmore?
Are we done with public comment?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Anybody else from the public?
That's it.
We'll close public comment. Commissioner Whitmore?
First of all, I'd like to clarify with Mike, Blake does not participate in our indigent care program. They do not accept, they bought the HIE, but they aren't using it. And I think they bought it, but they've never utilized it.
Correct.
Hooked up with us or anything. They said it's not worth it because of the amount of indigents that they'd have to take. It's not worth the monies. And as far as your comments on the revenue, I just think it's only right that we explain on our side that this isn't projected, because if you'd been upstairs, as you know, and we have been told that this money, even though it's unrestricted, is not unrestricted. So I'd like you to explain, and then that's all I have.
Basically, when we went through the fund summary, especially the unreserved fund balance that you're quoting that's in the interim statements, one of the things that's important to note right now, and Angel Coloniso mentioned it during a meeting last time, although it looks like you have a lot of profit right now, you've collected almost 92% of your ad valorem in 4 or 5 months. You have to live off that for the next 6 months. You still have bills coming through, and that will dwindle down. Now, Mr. Meehan pointed to your unreserved balance at the end of the year, that he thinks it will reach a certain amount. He's very close to what I estimated, and it's in your fund summary. That first work session that we had, we bring that in, and we explain that's our starting point, and then we go through. In addition, we also showed you one of the things that has been very impressive this year has been interest income. We showed you how we increased that up. So the hard time is between the interim statements, which also doesn't take into consideration if things are reserved for certain items. So for example, in the number that you're quoting, there's $2 million that belongs to the old CRAs. You can't access that. There's other things that we have money set aside for that's in our reserves, and as Mr. Wolfson has pointed out a lot of times, what he calls unassigned is not the same thing for budget. Budget has different terminology to it, and it's not exactly it's not one for one. But we're happy again, as we did during the work session, to walk you through. But the numbers that he is quoting where he projects the end of the year, that is in your general fund beginning balance.
Thank you.
Commissioner Benak.
Does any of that money include funding for the capital improvement plan?
The capital improvement plans, in the way the financial statements are set up, each of the capital improvement plans have their own funds, and they're lumped together within those funds. You'll see very significant balances in those because the clerk has required that anytime you enter into a contract, even if it's a 4-year contract, you have all the money up front. So for the roads, there's a highway project capital fund. You will notice a significant cash balance in there, but that's promised. You've actually entered into legal agreements saying this is what I'm going to pay for this. You're just holding the cash until it goes out. The general fund that he's talking about is the one that I was referring to, and that is your main source of fund that can be used for anything, and that is the one that is placed in there. Now, the $100 million he's talking about also includes your 20% cash balance. If you remember, you bring in everything that you have in government, you add what revenues you think you're going to get during the year, you write off what expenses, and then what's left is your reserves. That's how you get to the bottom line. And so 20% is around $54 million of that is your cash reserves. So it's all there in your fund summary sheet, and it's really just an accounting equation. This is the money that you have in this hand, and this is what you're going to do with it.
And Mr. Meehan's point is well taken. We do have healthy reserves. We have put money back in our reserves, what we call the budget stabilization fund, that we did draw down significantly. But there's no doubt that these past few years have seen a significant increase in growth in the county since we came out of the recession. Starting in 2012 was kind of the peak of it, if you will, and started after that. Started getting back on a plane. And certainly if it does turn out that we don't need to balance our budget utilizing these reserves, then we will have questions about what to do with it. Yeah, it doesn't make any sense just to have a gigantic reserve, but given the experience that we've had in the past, I would be very hesitant at this point to say we're ready to cut taxes. Maybe we will be in the future if this continues. But just the fact that we're just now rebuilding the reserve that we had to live off during the recession, and we know that, as Jan said, so much of this is due to growth. And it's, I don't know if you have that figure, how much of this increase is due to growth versus an increase. We know that we have Save Our Homes, which caps folks' taxes, which is a good thing. Somebody who's lived here for 35 years, I think it's a great thing. But the reality is, without the growth, we don't have the increase in our taxes. So it's something we need to be very careful about. And I have expressed my concerns about paying for health care, but I'm not going to say it's not needed, but I do have concerns about setting up a healthcare program funded by county government, given the way it's done elsewhere in the country, so.
Commissioner Bellamy?
Yeah, I just have a question. You made a statement about, sorry, you made a statement about CRAs. What does CRA stand for community?
Community
Development
redevelopment.
Okay, so there's $2 million there that we cannot touch. Can you explain that to me?
Yes, I can. So you had two old community redevelopment agencies. They were
Were they?
14th Street and South County CRA. And when the Southwest TIF was developed, they decided to stop those and just encompass the Southwest TIF, which was around the same areas. So when that happened, the administrator had us close those two funds, and the clerk's office, in agreement, we took them to the general fund and we hold it as a reserve. And I can show you in your fund summaries where it's at and where it's located. There's actually expenditures that Jerry and her office in Rio is accessing each year. They plan to spend it down. I think by the end of next year, it'll be down to 1.6, and then I think the year after that, they
Oh,
plan
it
it
is
to be.
being used?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Those two were sunsetted in October of 2014, and the board made a commitment within the ordinance to continue, if the programs were viable, the programs that were being funded in both of those CRAs until the funds were no longer available, and then reconsider those in the future under the new Southwest District.
So I think my misunderstanding when the statement was made, we can't use them, they are already being used.
Can I say it another way?
Please do.
Okay, so when you're saying you have $100 million balance and you're looking at it on the financial statements, you have to realize that on this side of the street, you have plans for that.
Okay.
You, the board, designated plans for that. So when I say you can't spend it, I'm just saying it's not up for just an open changes
So I think
unless you
maybe
decide.
that message
It's
is restrictive and made
Restrictive.
to our community. If they do visit online or they do look at the numbers, like we have some of our friends out here from the public, not representing communities, for them to maybe look at it from a different focus lens, is that, yeah, you see it, but there are some restrictions
Yes.
to it. That's how I'm.
There are
understanding.
plans for it, yes, correct.
Thank you. You're awesome.
Thank you.
Seeing nobody else, the only thing left is just again the announcement that the budget reconciliation meeting will be held in the commission chambers on July 30th of this year at 9 a.m. And at that point, we are now adjourned.
Thank you much.